Yes, I will, but I'd be amiss if I didn't take the opportunity to tell you something that opens up my eyes, makes my heart soar, and makes me really excited. And that's seeing Mike Slattery with a headband and that amazing, incredible afro you got going there, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, baby.
It's been a long COVID haul,
I love it. I love it. I think you need a few highlights just to accent
No
that. It's really,
cosmetology in my future.
yeah. Pull a few bucks out of the budget and get that done. I think we'd all sign off on that. No, but I know, and I love to give a shout out to Jeff Skelding here. I was actually the founder of Water Everywhere, and I really appreciate that he put me in the last slot on the last day when he knew I'd be in my car having to drive somewhere. So just a shout out to those guys for that. Thank you so much. But yeah, I'm kind of excited about this because we see something new every Water Everywhere. And this year, too, with Max Holmes being on and taking over here shortly, it's something else that's new in our watershed that hasn't really happened before. Max is the acting president and executive director of the Woodwell Climate Research Center, affiliated with Woods Hole. And what he'll be talking about probably more than anything is that he's the co-founder of Science on the Fly. So I won't steal the thunder on what Science on the Fly is all about, but when I met Max, and sorry, Max, also I hope Allie's on the call and you can introduce Allie. But when I met Max, he said, he told me about the program. We met through actually a relative of mine, my brother-in-law. And he said, we're not doing any water quality testing on the Delaware. Would you be willing to help out? So I've been personally testing 9 sites on the Delaware. I went through a little training seminar on how to do the water sampling. And I start above the dams on both reservoirs, Papacton and Cannonsville. And I start at Margaretville. And then on the East Branch, hit Downsville, Harvard, and Fish's Eddy. And then on the West Branch, I start in Walton and hit Walton, Stylesville, Hale Eddy, and then on the main stem, Lordville and Callicoon. So there's a total of 9 sites that we're testing as regularly as we can, close to once a month. I freeze the samples and then ship them off to Max for analysis. So with that, I'll let Max, I'm also have encouraged Max on this call to maybe mention that we don't stop water sampling at Callicoon, and that our friends and partners can reach out to Max and Allie and, let's sample our water all the way to the bay. And with that, Max, why don't I turn it over to you and you can let everybody know what you're looking for and how it's working out.
Sounds good, Dan. Thanks a lot. Thanks for that introduction. And I'm just going to say a few words at the start and mainly hand it over to Allie Cunningham, who will dive into some of the details, and then we'll kind of see where the conversation goes. Maybe I'll start by saying I'm sorry we couldn't kind of tune in to this whole conference. I've sort of looked at the program. I thought it looked really interesting. And then when I tuned in, signed on 10 or 15 minutes ago, and I started to hear about, we've got $1 million here, we've got, $15 million there. It's like, holy cow, I really wish I would have tuned in earlier. So no, but I mean, super interesting stuff you guys are doing. I'm eager to learn more. And yeah, we just want to tell you about this project that has some overlap, I think, or connection with what you all are interested in the Delaware River. So yeah, as Dan said, I'm at a place called the Woodwell Climate Research Center. Until a year ago, we were the Woods Hole Research Center. So if you don't recognize Woodwell Climate, maybe you recognize Woods Hole Research Center. So I'm on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. We're a climate change place. We study systems really around the world, how they're being impacted by climate change, how they feed back to climate change, and then we try to connect it to policy. So not just do the science, but actually make a difference in the policy arena. And Dan said I'm currently acting president, and I've been kind of sitting in this role for a month and a half or something now. And I'm in this role because our president for the past several years, a guy named Phil Duffy, got called by the White House to be the climate advisor there. So when they called, he listened, and I'm filling in for a year or so while he's, connecting science to policy related to climate change in the White House. So the science that I do, and I'm a scientist, and the science I do really focuses on rivers and looks at trends in river chemistry and discharge, and tries to figure out what that's tells us about what's happening in the watershed. So I like to get long-term study sites going, sampling at a point on a river or different points on a river, sample over the seasons to look at seasonal cycles, and then I think over the years to look at change over time, to try to figure out how climate change or development or dams or whatever it may be is impacting the rivers, what that means for river health, and also then just to use, again, that signal in river chemistry and discharge to figure out what's going on or get clues about impacts in the watershed. So I've spent a lot of my time in parts of the world where climate change is a big deal. So I guess arguably that's everywhere now, but I've been working in the Arctic for a long time. So I spent a lot of time in Alaska, Canada, the Siberian Arctic, working in the Amazon and Congo and Mekong, and sort of big rivers around the world. And, for a couple of decades, it's maybe been 20 rivers that we're doing work on, collecting, again, filling water bottles at fixed sites multiple times a year and trying to keep that going. I've always wanted to be able to work in more places, and it's just sort of time and money that is the limitation there. But when I'm not on a river as a scientist, I'm on a river as an angler, a fly fisherman. And I've always, for a long time, in the back of my head, I've had this idea that there must be a way to put these two things together. And there's fly fishers around the world, and they're passionate about rivers like I am, protecting rivers, understanding rivers. And so, I've always had this idea, maybe there's a way to bring these things together. And then I guess it was around 5 years ago, I was starting to spend some time in Telluride, Colorado. I had some family connections out there, got to know the guys that own Telluride Angler, the fly shop in town. I also sort of independently of that met this guy, Johnny LeCoq, who's the founder and owner of Fish Pond, which is a fly fishing supply company. And we started to kick around ideas about how to, we all have this shared passion for rivers, understanding, protecting rivers, coming at it from a different direction. And so we started to think about how we could pull these communities together. And so we kind of had a prototype. We said, all right, let's working with Telluride Angler, 8 sites around Telluride. They started sampling them, some guides, and that's where Allie got involved. I didn't know Allie, and turned out she was doing most of the sampling around Telluride and just doing a fantastic job of that. We got some money from Patagonia to try to expand to some additional sites around Colorado. Didn't really know if that would work, but it did. We got some philanthropic funding to expand further, and I'll let Allie kind of take over from there and start to tell the story of how things have developed. But yeah, just again, Allie Cunningham. I guess Allie, you can say a few words about yourself, but I'll say that, it was very good fortune to meet, like Dan, but to meet Allie, who's carried a lion's share of the load and helps to keep us organized and charging forward. And now she's acting as, she's the director of this thing and kind of keeping us all in line and charging ahead. Allie.
Thanks, Max. And thanks to everyone here in the Upper Delaware River, or the Friends of the Upper Delaware River, and the Water Everywhere for allowing us to speak. But yeah, I'm Allie Cunningham. I got involved, like Max said, I live in Telluride. I'm actually originally from Massachusetts, in Rochester, Massachusetts, so right near Marion and Mattapoisett, New Bedford area. But I didn't know Max until he was out here in Telluride. And I've been working at the fly shop. I also do river restoration and some mine remediation around here. And I was looking to do something a little bit more. And that's when Science on the Fly was coming into play. And so I immediately started sampling. And then I started bugging Max and being like, what else can I do? How else can I get involved? So I am so honored to have grown with Science on the Fly. Another big thanks to Dan Plummer, who has been sampling for us since the start as well. When I think of Science on the Fly and where we all started, it started with Telluride Angler, but it also started with Dan Plummer, and really getting those 9 locations sampled on the Upper Delaware River. I have a PDF that I'm going to share with you guys. Max has already covered some bits of it. I'll fill in some information, but then at the end of the slideshow, we'll start looking at some of the data that Dan Plummer has collected. Just note that this data that we're going to be sharing only goes up to, I believe, October 2020, because we have yet to analyze his incoming samples that he's collected for the past year. So I also, big note, have just found out that it might be lagging when I share my screen. So I will try to go slowly and pause, but let me just get that going.
We should also say, feel free to jump in with questions or comments along the way.
Yeah. Okay. So can you guys see my screen?
We can.
Okay, great. So we are Science on the Fly, and our mission is for healthy rivers. So everything we do is for healthy rivers, and healthy rivers, especially when it comes to climate change. And this PDF was shared with Shell, and I believe it's going to go on the website. So you guys can reference back to this when you would like to. But the problem, as Max was already talking about, he was studying many rivers around the world and wanted to, or a couple of the large rivers around the world, and want to study even more. And the other problem are that anglers are always looking for ways to give back to their watershed, and any conservationist and enthusiast is looking to give back. And Science on the Fly was the solution for that. So we use citizen scientists to collect water samples from designated locations 1 time per month. And then those volunteers will then ship those samples to Woodwell Climate Research Center, where they'll be analyzed. So about us, we started in 2019 between Woodwell Climate Research Center and Fish Pond. So we have Dr. Max Holmes, and then we also have Johnny Lecoq, who is the founder and CEO of Fish Pond. He is on the board of Woodwell Climate Research Center and also a huge climate activist. And so it's pretty obvious to do a partnership between these two. And we are also a project under Woodwell Climate Research Center, I just wanted to also point out. But like I said, we use citizen scientists to collect water samples 1 time per month. They then freeze these samples. They'll hold them in their freezer for about 3 months, or until they're sick of looking at water samples in their freezer. And then they'll ship them over to Woodwell Climate Research Center, where the lab there will analyze them for nutrients and organic compounds. So they're going to be looking at nitrate, ammonium, total dissolved nitrogen, phosphate, silica, dissolved organic carbon, and in other locations, we have, like here in Telluride, I'm looking at pH, conductivity, and a couple other things. We're also looking at temperature, the air temperature and water temperature. Our goals for Science on the Fly are to add to the data set of important climate science on our river systems, but also to use this data to help create and enforce policies. This is a long-term study. We don't just want one volunteer collect one sample and say, okay, this is what we're seeing in the watershed. This is an over time, long-term study, so we can see how our watersheds are changing due to the climate. Our team, we can't do this. As you guys know, we can't do this successfully without our team members. And so we have a good amount of them, some from Woodwell Climate Research Center, like Lindsay, Anya, and Greg. And then we have other key players like Jack, Stash, and Steven, who are on the behind the scenes when it comes to our website or graphics or helping us spread the word. Okay, so we started in July of 2019, and originally we were a fly shop model. So we partnered with Telluride Angler, and we were hoping to partner with a couple other fly shops or organizations. And we were going to originally teach the fly shops how to sample. They teach their guides. The guides would teach out the clients, and the clients would collect these water samples, learn about the watershed they're fishing on, and it'd be a really educational experience overall. And hopefully they'd want to protect the watershed. And then COVID hit in spring of 2020, and that kind of paused everything. Fly shops didn't know what was happening. Some were extremely busy, some weren't as busy. And we started seeing a lot of individual people, a lot of individual anglers reaching out to us, wanting to sample for Science on the Fly. And we immediately switched over to more of an individual model for Science on the Fly. We only have about 10 fly shop partners. Other than that, it's mainly individual volunteers that were super enthusiastic and passionate about their watershed and wanting to get involved. So since the fall of 2020, about a year ago, we started with 14 volunteers, 10 states, 2 countries, and 45 sample locations. And right now we have 109 volunteers, 39 states, 6 countries, 621 sample locations. And I'm about to add one more state today. Indiana will have a volunteer in that area starting hopefully this week. And if you do know anyone in these non-highlighted areas that would be interested in sampling on their watershed, we are looking for more anglers. We're not proactively onboarding, but if you know anyone in these areas, we definitely consider adding them to our list of samplers. Okay, some of our findings, and Max, do you want to take over from here, or do you want to take over after this?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll just say a couple of things here. So as Ali said, and I think I said at the beginning, really our goal is to keep this going for a long time, to be able to look at change over time and figure out what that means. But of course, things jump out right away, or at least in some cases, they jump out right away. And these are just a few things that sort of caught our eye. There was some interesting patterns around Telluride, high mountain area, low population density, I would say relatively pristine, although it's not that there haven't been impacts there, but one of the sites sampled, the nutrient concentration is much higher than the other ones. And, you spend a little time figuring out what's going on there, and you trace it back to the wastewater treatment plant and look a little bit closer. There's more work to be done there, certainly, but it turns out, hey, they're having some problems treating wastewater to the level that they're supposed to. So this is one area I think where the data are starting to be useful on local on the ground stuff. Crazy concentrations. And if you go to the website, there are some interactive maps you can look at for, I think, nitrate, phosphate, and dissolved organic carbon, maybe. You'll see just super high nitrate concentrations at some sites in Texas. And we're not fully sure what's going on there, but that certainly requires more digging into. The sampling being done at this location is outside of Austin near Round Rock. It's Living Water Angler, a really cool fly shop. The owner is really passionate, in the middle of Texas, super passionate about doing something to understand, protect this watershed. So that's a neat place to be working. And then, yeah, it's, as you guys all know a lot more about the Delaware River than we do, but Dan and maybe some of others have been doing just a great job of collecting samples. We're excited to analyze a lot more of the samples that have been collected over the last year, but we'll show, I think, a couple of figures in a minute and what you'll see. And maybe you guys have the explanation for, I think Dan has ideas for, but just you see this higher nitrate. Nitrate's, the main form of nitrogen that's in rivers, and super important nutrient. And yeah, you see differences between the West Branch and the East Branch. And so that caught our eye. Allie,
real quick, Max, I think Don Hamilton, do you have a question? I see there's like a hand emoji on the screen right now.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt Max, but why don't you go ahead and finish, Max, and I'll just share something at the end.
Okay,
Great.
and don't worry about interrupting. I don't mind. We can roll with it. So yeah, if you want to jump in, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, let's go to the next slide, Allie. And I think we just have a couple of data slides to show that. Oh yeah, those are the sites. I think Dan mentioned those. I think there's 9 sites that are being sampled on the west and east branches, and some on the main stem of the upper Delaware. Next one, Allie. And yeah, so what this shows is on the left hand, it's the the individual data points, sample values for the samples that we had analyzed at that point. So it's sort of the time series. I don't know, there were 5 or 6 months that were sampled then, and then on the right side shows the average concentrations over that time period. And again, we have another year's worth of samples to analyze, so we'll have a lot more data soon. Just sort of what jumps out, yeah, there's some seasonal cycles or seasonal variability. As we get more years, we'll figure out what the cycles actually are. But yeah, what jumps out just in terms of nitrate concentrations, it's those 3 West Branch sites that have higher concentrations than the East Branch or than the main stem after the confluence. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear your ideas about what might be driving that. And again, like scientifically, what I get really excited about is keeping an eye on this stuff and seeing how things change over time. You know, do you see some, well, yeah, then trying to figure out what's driving that change. Next one, Allie. I think the next one is phosphate, and, you know, another super important nutrient influencing river systems and, you know, water bodies everywhere. Not a lot of variability there. Where you see one jump out as strange is that downstreammost site. If you look on the left-hand side, you can see the higher average and the sort of big variability about it. If you look at the figure for that site on the left-hand panel, you'll see it's really one point that's driving that high average. So, you know, we'll is that real? Was that contamination? Was that some other issue? It's hard to say, but as we continue to collect and analyze more samples, we'll see whether this kind of thing jumps out again. Let's go to the next one, Allie. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about this. Dissolved organic carbon is one we pay a lot of attention to in a lot of the systems we work in. We see some changes in the rivers in the Arctic as permafrost is thawing. It's, you know, it kind of has a direct link in some ways to climate change. Nothing jumps out here as unusual. Again, the change over time story is what we'll be keeping our eye on. Let's see what's next. I can't remember what's next.
Great. Does anyone have any questions about that data? And we have more figures to show, and I can also add it to the PDF I shared earlier with Shell. But does anyone have questions right now?
Hi, Ellie. This is Dan.
Hey, Dan.
So I do want to just say that it's not these guys' fault that they don't have the rest of my samples to analyze. There was a little pause this summer where they didn't want me to ship things there because I think Max was away or traveling. And then when he came back, I kind of dropped the ball. So I do have a freezer full and I'm going to ship them maybe tomorrow. So I'll take full responsibility for not having the most current data up there right now.
Dan, you're taking the fall, Dan. It's probably really on our side, and I was supposed to get back to you. But yeah, the sample shipment part was super easy when in the thick of COVID, because I was always home, so we could just tell people send these things to me. You know, would send the shipping labels that come to me at home. But as I started doing some more travel this summer, I was in Alaska, I was in Colorado, I was in Montana. We had to be a little careful about when the samples were actually shipped, so that there'd be somebody there to receive them when they were shipped. So, yeah, I'll take the fall on that one, Dan. You don't, you know.
Yeah, and I'll coordinate with you, Dan, as well.
Okay, great.
The last bit of the slide, we just wanted to quickly go over our goals. So for Science on the Fly, we want to be in all 50 states. As I said, we're already international. We're in about 6 countries right now, and that's been pretty fun figuring out all the international overnight shipping, especially in the middle of the summer, so our samples don't freeze. We want to add some temperature data loggers at 10% of the locations. We have a couple here in Telluride, Colorado, but that way we can track water temperature every 15 minutes and tell the story even more of our watersheds. And it'd be really interesting to add some to some of the sites in the upper Delaware River. So we'll probably talk to Dan about some specific locations he might have in mind. It'd be ideal to get up to 500 locations. Right now we're at about 330 locations. We want to be able to tell the story of Science on the Fly more and help the volunteers talk about what's happening in their watersheds with their data and how they can best utilize their data. We've had some volunteers reach out to us just to partner if it comes to like river cleanups. We've also had someone reach out about using, he's able to calculate the nitrate load on his watershed, and he was using that with one of his organizations he's a part of. The other part that we really are focusing on right now is the sustainability of Science on the Fly. Although we can make it pretty cheap for analyzing our samples compared to what the cost of water samples can be, it still is pretty expensive. It's about $100 per water sample, and that includes the sampling materials, It includes the shipping, and it also includes the lab analysis. So we've created some fun things like Sponsor River, and then we've been doing partnerships with organizations to add more research to their watersheds. Let me see if I can. Okay, so that's it. So thanks so much for letting us present. Does anyone have any questions for Max and myself? I know, John, you wanted to wait to the end.
Yeah, I just wanted to share some information with you. I think what you're doing is great in terms of monitoring change in water quality over time, especially in light of climate change. Something you should be aware of is that the Delaware River Basin Commission has developed an atlas of existing water quality of the Delaware River Special Protection Waters, which extends all the way down to Trenton now. And existing water quality has been defined for 28 interstate control points on the Delaware River and on the West Branch of the Delaware River, and for 57 tributary watershed boundary control points. And existing water quality was defined for these sites based on a robust data set that goes back to the Scenic Rivers Monitoring Program has been in existence for 30 plus years here. It's a collaborative effort between the Delaware River Basin Commission and the National Park Service. And I can send you a copy of that water quality atlas so you can take a look at all the parameters that have been sampled for that would help, I think, inform your sampling. And you may also want to get in touch with Jake Bransky, the aquatic ecologist for the Delaware River Basin Commission, who currently works with that program. And also, I would request that you apply for a research and collecting permit from the National Park Service for your sampling on the Upper Delaware River, just so we're in the loop with what you're doing and getting information on your results.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Don. Oh.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for all that. I mean, certainly the Delaware is, I won't say unique, but it's different than most of the places we're working in, that there's a vast amount of work that's been done there and it's going,
Yeah.
you know, is ongoing. And a lot of places we're sampling, there's just no sort of historical data or
Yeah.
ongoing sampling. So it's great to have all that information.
And there's also a real-time water quality monitoring station on the Lordville Bridge, which monitors for dissolved oxygen, conductivity, temperature, turbidity, depth. And we installed that in 2012. It's now operated by USGS. The USGS is also installing more such monitors throughout the basin. So they'd be another organization to touch base with.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks for all that.
Yeah, thank you, Don. And I'll also try to find your email address and reach out to you after
Great.
this.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Max and Ali. I see one question came in through the chat box, which is any thoughts correlating the chemistry data with invertebrate population changes?
I'd say it's an exciting thing to do. Certainly in the scope of what we're able to do, we're not sampling the invertebrate populations. I think Ali said, but I'll reiterate that all the data that we generate is public. So we want people to use it. So, you know, if somebody is interested, we want anybody to use it for any purpose, essentially, but certainly it's out there if somebody else wants to do that kind of work. We've sort of designed the program such that, you know, it's a fairly straightforward sampling protocol. We kind of provide everything that's needed. You're, you know, filling a 60 ml HDP bottle with filtered water. It goes through a 0.22 micron filter. So we're not, you know, we're not collecting any biological samples. It's, you know, sterile water essentially that we're analyzing the chemistry. And so that's how we're able to do it at a lot of different spots with a lot of different volunteers. And if we were to try to fold something into it, say looking at the invertebrate communities, that would just be a, you know, that would quickly overwhelm our capacity keep up with. But it's exactly questions like that we want other people to dive into, and if they want to look at the invertebrate communities and connect it to the water quality, water chemistry in the places we're working, that would be awesome.
Hey, Max and Allie, this is Jeff. I'll just throw this out there, and Don might have something to say about this. Mike might, any other sciencey person out there. We have a lot of anglers here who have theories about everything. And one of them is that the East Branch, so the West Branch, I think historically was phosphorus compromised, and it's a different landscape, different land uses, different topography than the East Branch. And the East Branch, there's a common belief among our fly anglers here that the East Branch actually is nutrient limited, that there isn't enough nitrogen and phosphorus. I think, Dan, there's only that one farm up, the Matson farm up there on your stretch of the river, and that the dam somehow has some kind of sterilizing effect on the river below. Is that something any of you have heard of and have any thoughts about?
I certainly can't speak specifically to the situation on the Upper Delaware. I know there are some cases, I can think of a trout stream in the west where a large property owner who owns miles and miles of this river is interested in adding phosphorus to stimulate primary productivity, plant growth, which would stimulate insects and hopefully grow more and bigger trout. So it's not inconceivable. It's certainly not inconceivable that processes in reservoirs can strip some nutrients and lead to that situation. In the vast majority of cases and places around the world, it's the opposite problem. It's the opposite situation that's causing a problem. Excess nutrients leading to all kinds of bad things in rivers and downstream receiving, estuaries and coastal zones and so on.
Right. Mike Slattery spent enough time in the Chesapeake Bay to know that situation.
Yeah.
Max, I'll share with you that Atlas of Existing Water Quality, the Delaware River Basin Commission has produced, and you can look at the data there. I think there may be some truth to the fact that the Upper East Branch especially is more nutrient limited. That's one place where we've had Didymo show up not too far below, and Didymo's something that appears in nutrient poor conditions. It kind of sequesters nutrients like phosphorus to enable it to grow. So yeah, there may be some truth to that.
Thanks, Don.
I apologize. I have to jump off this call in just a second for another meeting. Like I said, I wish I could have joined in earlier, and I hope we'll find more opportunities to talk. You guys are doing some awesome stuff, and it's exciting for us just to dip our toe in it.
Thanks, Max. We're glad Dan found you and you found Dan and Allie, and this is all good stuff, and appreciate you coming.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Max.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. And like I said, there's a PDF. My contact info is on there, and I'll get in touch with you, Don. But if you do have questions about Science on the Fly or about any of our data, you can email me, Allie@scienceonthefly.org. But thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Allie, did you see in the chat that I sent you some
Yes, the
information?
gunpowder.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not a
okay.
Delaware relevant thing, but it's one watershed over. And
Oh, that's perfect. I appreciate it. Thanks so
yeah,
much.
I know sure.
Okay, so it's been a long couple of days, and our numbers have dwindled here. Thanks to everyone who has hung in there for the whole show. One thing that I think that Sherry and Dan, who've been around the longest here, will agree here is that this Water Everywhere was jam-packed full of a lot of information. So we're going to be challenged to package that up and put it in some kind of coherent form that can be useful to everybody, and give us some time. We will do that. So does anybody have any parting words or any final thoughts? And I'm speaking to everybody here.
I think it's been a great conference you put together, and I've really enjoyed what I've been able to attend.
Thank you, Don. Thanks for being here as always.
Yeah, I have too. I really appreciate you guys making the effort to put this on every year. It's, it's always amazing to me how many connections can be made. For me, I think, after doing this for several years now, I don't always know who's going to attend or what kind of network connections can be made. And I'm always surprised that I come out of it feeling excited about something new. And in this case, among many other things, just to help others understand how unbelievably fortuitous it is to be able to triangulate these ways. What I was just mentioning to Allie is that there is a tailwater fishery in the Chesapeake watershed. Jeff, you know it well, the gunpowder.
Yes.
Upper Gunpowder is a pretty well-known tailwater fishery, and there's a fly shop owner who also happens to be now the Gunpowder River keeper, and Maryland wasn't colored in on her map, and so now we're making that connection, and it occurs to me that there's another connection there in that Bob Bachman was the scientist leader of the Maryland Fisheries Agency that restored the gunpowder tailwater fishery to its current state. And I know that Theo Lagarder, who owns, Backwater Angler and a fly shop there, in the gunpowder, is going to be interested in taking part in science on the fly. I know it. So just, it's amazing how these connections can be drawn.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. Okay, with that,